Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, February 3rd, 2021, and today marks day one of my analysis series geared towards the Joe Biden, Kamala Harris administration, where we're going to be taking a look at the favorability rating and the promises that were made prior to the 2020 election and looking at how Joe Biden is sort of handling that and what's actually being done. So this popularity rating is something that is going to be updated every single day as polls get released. But it looks as if so far I'm going to do this once every 2 weeks, and as we get closer to the midterms, once a week. And then we'll take a break, and then we will focus on it as 2024 rolls around. I know it seems like a long time away, but 2017 felt a very far time away from 2020, and it seemed to creep up way faster than expected. So looking at Joe Biden's popularity rating, this is crucial for the Democratic Party. Now that they are in the Democratic trifecta, the approval rating of Joe Biden, the Democrats, and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer likely will all be correlated because they are all going to be working together on the same type of policy. And of course, there's going to be varying differences, the way that certain politicians handle certain issues. Joe Biden, I expect to be the most popular out of the bunch, but overall, they are working towards the same goal and they have the power to do so. So based on what they choose to do with the Senate, with the House, and of course, landing on the president's desk will largely be reflected on the approval rating of all three politicians and of course, the Democratic Party. So today is Wednesday, February 3rd, and we are looking at an approval rating of 52.7%. I know what you're thinking. That doesn't seem like too high, considering that previous presidents have had much higher approval ratings. However, this is actually a difference of around 17.5%. So an 18-point difference between the approve and the disapprove, which is very strong for Joe Biden. Keep in mind, relative to Donald Trump, he was never at this position. Donald Trump was never above 50% in terms of approve. The only time he was approved of overall was his, immediately after the inauguration for a 10-day grace period. Since then, it had not been up there. And, Joe Biden has surpassed that time period. His approval rating is in the positive, and we are roughly 2 weeks into the administration. I think today marks officially 14 days. But that's not the main purpose. We are just going to be tracking the approval rating and looking at how it fluctuates over time. And so far, for today's recap, the main thing is Joe Biden's approval rating is starting to tip off from the honeymoon. So I know you probably think I'm crazy for saying, oh, it dips down to 53% nationwide, but it did dip down. When he started out in the presidency, he had a 53% approval rating. It went up to 55%, down to 54%, and now it's down to 52.7%. Now, while this seems like a steady decline, you also have to realize that the country is much more polarized than it had been in years past with incoming presidents. Many people in the country gave Donald Trump a chance, which is why he was approved of in the immediate part of his presidency. But for previous presidents, Joe Biden doesn't necessarily do too much worse. In fact, he does better than some of the previous presidents. Notably Donald Trump, but besides him, he does better than some of the more previous presidents. Compared to Donald Trump, he has a roughly 8-point higher approval rating. Compared to Barack Obama, a roughly 9.8-point lower approval rating than Obama. Obama actually had one of the highest approval ratings of any president incoming, just because, he was someone who had won on a platform of change. He had won by a landslide at that. He'd won the Democrats over 250 seats in the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives that they had from 2006. On top of that, he got them nearly 60 Senate seats. So Obama did something that nobody really expected back in 2004, 2006, but he revolutionized the American electoral map, and he was able to win in states that were completely unreachable. And Joe Biden did win in states that were previously perceived as unreachable, but they ended up being close in this election. He won Georgia and he won Arizona, but he by no means won by a landslide. The American people voted for him by 5 percentage points, and there's a much bigger difference between 5% and 18%. Based on how polarized we are, I'm surprised his approval rating is as high. But he isn't doing too bad. Compared to previous presidents, he has a higher approval rating than Donald Trump did, higher approval rating than George W. Bush, around, even with Bill Clinton, off by less than a percentage, higher than Ronald Reagan, starting off in his first term. So looking at Joe Biden's performance so far, I don't think the Democratic Party should be too worried about this approval rating being only 18 points, right? It's very different now that we're looking with a new administration, a return to normalcy, which also means a return to not being immediately disapproved of the president of the United States. You see, Donald Trump largely earned that disapproval rating because of his character, because of the things he said, the things that he campaigned on. The American people did not like Donald Trump when they elected him. The American people, however, did like Joe Biden when they elected him. They liked Obama. They liked George W. Bush the first time. These candidates, a lot of the times, if they are liked by the American people, they will win. Joe Biden was liked by the American people. 2020 was not in the same narrative of choosing the lesser of two evils. It was Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Public opinion of Donald Trump had increased from 2016, and public opinion of Joe Biden had actually increased from 2019. Originally, he was disapproved of. After the whole character campaign, which worked eloquently, Joe Biden's approval rating went up to being, 18 points, 20 points higher than Donald Trump's, where it was even in the positive. You see, compared to Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden's favorability rating was actually pretty high, very high, 20 points higher at one point. Hillary Clinton lost the 2016 election with negative 12 in terms of the favorability rating. Donald Trump, negative 21. While Trump's increased, the Democratic Party's candidate did as well. Joe Biden is no Hillary Clinton. He was a likable candidate. He is a likable president. That's why his popularity rating is so high. He's by no means as outlandish or as abrasive as President Trump. And that's what largely hurt him originally. I don't think the majority of Americans disapproved of the way Donald Trump was handling the oath of office just 10 days into his presidency. I think this largely had to do with the fact that they were upset with his character, upset with the words that he was saying, not with the positions he was taking, or maybe it was, not with the way he was handling the oath of office. I mean, it was too early to tell at that point, which is exactly why I wouldn't say, this is the end-all be-all. Joe Biden's going to be a popular president because he starts out with the first 2 weeks being in the approved of. Like I'd mentioned, part of going back to a sense of normalcy is that this is normal. This is supposed to happen. But Joe Biden still does remain popular. And I think that our American electorate is much more divided than it had been in the past. I mean, I haven't been alive for too long. I've only been alive since the 2004 election. Really, that was the first presidential election I could have experienced, even though obviously I didn't. 2004. I mean, looking at the country over time, it definitely wasn't as politically divided in the past. The Democrats definitely have had a much better position in 2008, 2012. In fact, elections were closer. And I do think that we were a very polarized nation, throughout points in history. By no means are we the worst point of polarization in our country. For centuries, half the American electorate, if not more, thought that black voters shouldn't be able to vote. Thought that slavery was okay. So this is by no means comparable to the years past, but in modern political history, I would say we are at a point where our country is so politically divided that simple political differences can fundamentally change the way you look at someone. And that's true. I mean, ask yourself, even though you may be someone who may be, a complete Democrat, complete Republican, complete independent, that once you find out someone supports one policy, whether you like it or not, it could very well change the way you view them. That's possible. I mean, the majority of Americans do feel that way, which is largely why I think that Joe Biden's approval rating, while it's normal, is also something that can be celebrated. You see, we're at a little bit of a mixed match point here where you're saying one thing, this is to be expected because we are returning to a normal type of political field because it's Joe Biden in office and not Donald Trump. There isn't a, pollster bias. There isn't a, silent Biden support. But also, you also have to point out that the majority of Trump voters believe the election was rigged. That's where this 35% is coming from. I mean, if any president was incoming into the office, they should never have a higher disapproval rating than 20%, 20, 30%, because you don't know exactly what they're going to do until later on. Almost immediately, Joe Biden had a 36% disapproval rating on day one. It actually went up to 37% a few days later. So looking at the disapproval rating, Joe Biden definitely is going to have a third of the country, at least a little bit more than a third, that consistently disapproves of him no matter what happens. The only thing that I could see changing this is if they get the COVID stimulus checks out and people get direct benefits from it. Because if that doesn't happen, Joe Biden's approval rating will, God forbid, right, hover around plus 10, plus 15, plus 20. And I think this also has to do with the fact that, first of all, I don't even know why we're talking about just an 18-point difference in terms of approval. I mean, it is to be expected for someone who's a career politician, someone who's, the normal type of president, as the Democrats put it back in the 2020 campaign season. But also it's something that is very important to note. We shouldn't be talking about Joe Biden plummeting in the polls because he goes from plus 20 to plus 15. He's still a popular president. He's still approved of by the majority of the American people. And it's not just 538. You can also point out Real Clear Politics, which is a site that actually does skew a little bit to the right. in terms of their ratings, in terms of their polls that they choose to allow. But overall, the spread here is plus 18.1%. Joe Biden is a popular president at this point. And this also could do with the fact that his promises are starting to be kept. 12% are in the works, right? 5% have already been kept. His promises in the first the first 100 days, this is when we're going to be tracking him heavily. We're going to see what he's promised to do, what he has done so far. I mean, the green is in the, he has done this, and then the yellow is in the works. So far, reverse family separation policies, he's done that. Reverse the transgender military ban, day one, he's done that. Immediately rescind the Muslim bans, day one, done that. Rejoin the World Health Organization, done that. Restore the White House Directorate for Global Health Security. So looking at all of the things that we have done, under the Biden administration, you could say Joe Biden is starting to match what he had promised through the campaign season. Now, of course, he's going to break some of these promises. He's going to have to compromise with some of these promises. Donald Trump could not fulfill all of his promises. He broke roughly half of them. So looking at the track record for previous presidents, it's not just Trump. It's also Obama. It's also Bush. It's also Clinton. It's also George H.W. Bush. It's also Reagan. Presidents break promises all the time. And their approval rating does take a dip for it. But for right now, based off of Joe Biden's immediate actions of rescinding the Muslim bans on travel and immigration, changing the way that COVID restrictions are handled on federal property, reversing the transgender ban, rejoining the World Health Organization, rejoining the Paris Climate Accord, a number of these executive orders that the right-wing media is starting to say is negative for Joe Biden isn't being reflected in the national approval. And the main takeaway here is that what Joe Biden is doing so far is popular. These discussions with Republicans about COVID-19 relief, this pressure on Democratic senators to push for COVID relief. This is something that is working for the Biden administration. He is still a popular president, whether you like it or not. Joe Biden is in the positive. He's in the plus. It can go into the negative. I'm not saying that's out of the question, but for right now, I would say Joe Biden is handling the presidency pretty well in the eyes of the American public. Now, in 2 weeks from now, the numbers could be very different. We will check in on this in 14 days from now, and then the 14 days after, and 14 days after. But looking at Joe Biden's performance, I will say the American people are, I guess, happy with the way that Biden is handling the presidency. And also, they like him as a person. That's one thing we never saw with Donald Trump. No matter how long he was ever polled, from 2015, he had always been in the disapprove. He's made significant gains, but it dipped immediately after the Capitol insurrection. I mean, Donald Trump, his favorability rating is different than the job approval rating. Favorable is how you view someone. Approval rating is how you approve of their job handling. Joe Biden is only approved of by 51.1% of the American public, according to Real Clear Politics, but he's approved of by an additional 9%, I think, 20%, right? 19 point something percent. Let's go ahead and see. Looking at Biden's job approval, or 8% more, it's higher than his favorability rating. That makes sense. I mean, it makes sense. Joe Biden is a likable person, but there definitely are people who don't trust him, who think that he's just another career politician. There may be Democrats who don't like Joe Biden. That's not out of the question whatsoever. There were many people who said they were settling for Joe Biden rather than wholeheartedly supporting him. But his job approval rating is how people sort of say, personality aside, how do I approve of this person's handling of the oath of office? I think that was something that was missing with Donald Trump. They were too closely correlated because Donald Trump used his oath of office to push an agenda. He pushed an agenda that was very similar to the way he campaigned. He pushed an agenda that was always about his reelection bid, always about successes for himself. And I think that's largely what hurt him. Because while he came in as a political outsider, he left as an insider. Of course, you're the president, and you're going to be labeled as an insider. But that was never the message that he wanted to come across with. Joe Biden so far is trying to come across with this message of unity. That's why he's meeting with GOP senators. That's why he's starting to discuss COVID relief with conservative Democrats, with governors around the country, regardless of political party. Joe Biden is trying to push this image that he is a bipartisan president, that he is someone who can work across the aisle, because that's what he's known for. Joe Biden did that as vice president. He did that in the Senate. he was able to convince Republicans to vote with the Democratic Party. He worked with them to get bills passed. He worked with them when it was in a very tricky position to say, this is something that needs to get done. If you do this, I'll do this for you. Work with me and I'll work with you. Compromise. That was what Joe Biden was big about. Bipartisan support. That's what Joe Biden was big about. Now he's realized that the Democrats are in the trifecta, so he can practically push any type of agenda that he wants, but he recognizes the very need to unify this nation, to speak with Republicans as well as Democrats, because you're not going to be a unified nation without speaking to all members of the political aisle. But Joe Biden, approval rating so far is in the positive, because what he's doing, whether through executive order or through budget reconciliation or through pressured tactics, whatever it might be, Joe Biden is still remaining in the positive, according to the American public. Joe Biden is approved of by 18 points nationwide. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my post-2020 election videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.